Secretary of Florida DEP for being with us today. Also, Florida's Chief Resilience Officer, Dr. Wesley Brooks. We also have Dr. Mark Rains, the Chief Science Officer of the state of Florida. Chauncey Goss from Sanibel, Chairman of the South Florida Water Management District. We have Representatives Roach, Batana, Persons Malika, who represent Southwest Florida in the Florida legislature, and I want to thank them for being here. I saw Senator Ray Rodriguez is here, your senator from Lee County. We have Charlotte Roman and Ben Butler, also with South Florida Water Management. I want to thank them for their service. Noah Valenstein, American Flood Coalition, Brad Cornell with Audubon, Florida, Ray Sandelli, Lee County Commission Vice Chairman, and then Captains for Clean Water, Daniel Andrews and Chris Whitman. So I want to thank them for all that they're doing. Also would like, before we do today's announcement, point out that for the month of April, it's our current estimate that the state of Florida brought in about $760 million above estimate, which they just did the estimates a couple months ago. And so we consistently have been overperforming that. That means the surplus that we'll have for fiscal 21-22 is going to be by far the biggest surplus in the history of the state. I think when the fiscal year ends June 30th, we'll have well over $20 billion in surplus between the unallocated general revenue trust fund balances and our budget stabilization fund. So that's what you call being a good steward of people's money. We're built for the long haul. We have no income tax, very low tax burden, but there's nothing in the foreseeable future that would change that trajectory. Now, it's important that we've governed that way because I think it's very likely that Biden is going to plunge this country into a recession. If you look at some of the indicators, there's a lot of concern with the overall economy. Florida's been doing well, and we're happy about that. But when you have the inflation headwinds, when you have the Fed raising interest rates, when you have some of the other things that are happening in the markets, there is a possibility of seeing a downturn. And unfortunately, I think that downturn will have been precipitated by a lot of really bad policies coming out of Washington, D.C. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But I think prudent statesmanship is to be prepared in case something like that does happen. And so we are happy with our fiscal situation. If you did see a national economic downturn that impacted Florida, we have the reserves ready. We would not miss a beat in terms of meeting our priorities for education, infrastructure, water resources, all these things that have been so important to our mission to make Florida a great place to live and to keep the state free. Those continue going forward. And so we're proud of that. We'll see where we're at with May and June. But if we're even close to what we've been doing so far this year, you're looking at significant revenue coming in over and above what was forecasted. And so that's the position you want to be in. So today is very important because we launched the Resilient Florida program a couple years ago. We've put really significant amounts of funding, and basically it recognizes that we are a disaster-prone state, a low-lying state. People in our coastal communities in particular have to deal with flood risks. And so how do you fortify Florida to be able to withstand that? And so the Resilient Florida program is really about investing significant money in consultation and in collaboration with local communities to make the state more resilient to the threats that we see with storm surge, hurricanes, flooding, you name it. Today, we are awarding $20 million for Resilient Florida planning grants for communities across the state of Florida. This will represent 98 awards in really all corners of the state for communities to develop or update vulnerability assessments. And that's important because these assessments are necessary to identify infrastructure at risk of flooding and help communities prioritize and develop projects to mitigate these adverse events. Here in Lee County, we're awarding $582,000 to conduct vulnerability assessments for the county, as well as the city of Cape Coral and the city of Sanibel. And with today's investment, communities in Lee County and other communities across Florida will have the tools they need to better prepare for the impacts of major storms. And what happens is when they do these vulnerability assessments, they're able to identify where vulnerabilities are in their communities. They can propose and apply for grants to be able to fortify those vulnerabilities. And then with the money in our Resilient Florida program, we can match that. And so it's a great collaboration between local communities and the state of Florida. We've done, now it'll be between last year and this year, there's well over $1 billion that has been set aside by the state of Florida to assist with this. Almost always we get a one-to-one match, and so you're really looking at $2 billion of fortification just for our efforts over the last couple years. And we've really worked hard on this and other issues affecting Florida's environment. Last year we implemented the Resilient Florida grant program within DEP so that our coastal communities in particular would be able to seek money to help protection. They also passed last session Senate Bill 1954, which outlined the state's approach to resilience, and I want to thank Speaker Sprowls for really leading the effort on that. But it requires the development of the statewide flooding and resilience plan and created the Resilient Florida grant program. So we submitted the first ever plan last year, fully funded by the legislature this session, and really is showing that we're trying to get ahead of the risks for our state. And there is coordination. I mean, we could sit there in Tallahassee and have someone say we need to do all those things. It's really a bottom-up approach where the people that are living in these communities are really driving where the priorities are. And this is record funding for resilience projects. They also have a dedicated funding source now that's going to come in every year, which we never had before. Last year's budget, we had over more than $640 million to mitigate, prepare, and reduce the adverse impacts of these weather events for our communities. And as a result of this investment earlier this year, we announced over $404 million for 113 projects across the state through the Resilient Florida program. And that had a number of different uses. Some were relocating structures out of flood-prone areas. Some were elevating or relocating wastewater and drinking water facilities. Some would raise the elevation of buildings, roads, and other infrastructure. Some would establish living shorelines to reduce storm impacts. The budget recently passed by the legislature, which I am still reviewing, continues this momentum, and it has more than $500 million for resilience, including the funding for the planning grants that we are awarding today. And so today, the Department of the Department of Environmental Protection is opening the application portal for next year's planning grants, the money that's going to be in next year's budget that I'll be putting into action very soon. And the portal is available at protectingfloridatogether.gov/grants. So protectingfloridatogether.gov/grants. And this is just graded on basically neutral criteria. You'll see it's spread across the state. And these folks at DEP will evaluate that and then put the money in. So it's now, for the last 2 years, over $1 billion. And this is going to be something that it's already historic, but I think it's going to make a huge, huge difference. So we're excited about being here. We're excited about these planning grants, which are really an important part of what we're doing. We look forward to be able to work with the local communities toward even more significant grants for some major infrastructure improvements. All right, we're going to hear from some folks. We're going to hear from Sean Hamilton, Dr. Wes Brooks, Chauncey, and then Byron Donald. So Secretary Hamilton.
Thank you, Governor. Glad to join everybody here today at one of our award-winning state parks and home to some of the best resource managers on the planet. So glad to have everyone here today. I just want to point out, since taking office, Governor DeSantis has taken action to make Florida's communities more resilient. In addition to championing the creation of the Resilient Florida grant program that the governor mentioned, the governor has created the Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection at DEP to provide funding, technical assistance, and coordination among state, regional, and local entities, and appointed the state's first Chief Resilience Officer to coordinate the state's resilience efforts. Under the leadership of Governor DeSantis and the support of the Florida legislature, in 2021, Florida became one of the most proactive states in the nation in addressing the resilience of our coastal and inland communities, ensuring they are prepared for the current and future impacts of sea level rise, intensified storm events, and flooding. This included the passage of Senate Bill 1954. This comprehensive legislation ensures a coordinated approach to Florida's coastal and inland resilience needs. It ensures that sound science drives policy decisions throughout the state, and all communities are able to meet the needs for the future. The fiscal year 21-22 budget includes the most significant investment, as the governor noted, in the state's history, over $640 million to support resilience efforts across the state. I'm proud to be here today to announce the recipients of $20 million in planning grants for the FY 21-22 year. This funding will support 98 awards, develop and update comprehensive vulnerability assessments in inland and coastal communities. Vulnerability assessments are necessary to assess and identify critical infrastructure at risk of flooding from sea level rise, storm surge, and rainfall events, and to ensure the safety and resilience of Florida communities. This is a great day for resilience across the state. I would like to acknowledge the amazing job of the agency staff who's continuing to build out this resiliency program and making sure we're prepared for the future, and definitely want to thank the governor for his leadership. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Dr. Wesley Brooks, Chief Resiliency Officer.
Good afternoon. I'm thrilled to be here today in Southwest Florida with Governor DeSantis and Secretary Hamilton, esteemed members of the Florida legislature, and with Congressman Byron Donalds in support of inland and coastal communities across our state. I can't say enough about the importance of the well over $1 billion in state-directed funds that the governor spoke about that are going to be going towards the design and construction of really critical local and regional resilience projects out of both the FY 21-22 and FY 22-23 budgets. That's the work that folks are going to see and experience in their neighborhoods, on their commutes, or while recreating in amazing places like this. It's the work that will keep critical facilities operational in the wake of a storm surge event, that will allow first responders to better access flood-impacted communities on raised emergency evacuation routes, that will expedite the removal of stormwater from neighborhood streets without degrading water quality in our precious springs, lakes, rivers, bays, and estuaries, that will accelerate the deployment of living shorelines to reduce erosion, improve habitat, and enhance property values. And frankly, it's the work that the local officials and the community resilience planners that I most often engage with can't say enough good things about either. But to me, what the governor is really delivering today, $20 million in Resilient Florida planning grants, is just as exciting, because our governor is not just delivering 98 awards to local communities to conduct vulnerability assessments or to update community development plans. In fact, with these awards, our governor is really delivering confidence for taxpayers, for businesses, and most importantly for residents across the state. The confidence that Floridians' tax dollars are being utilized wisely. The confidence that future investments in Florida will remain a safe and attractive prospect, and the confidence that future projects in these communities will actually work as intended. All because the resilience projects developed from these state-supported planning efforts are grounded in rigorous analysis and the best available science and risk modeling. Today's awards will undoubtedly form the foundation for a future suite of statewide flooding resilience plan projects that will position all of our communities better than ever before for the impacts of future flood and storm events. And that's one of the many reasons why, under Governor DeSantis, the state of Florida is leading the way on resilience through action. So thank you, Governor, for your vision to best position our state for the future and for your strong ongoing support of our inland and coastal communities.
All right, South Florida Water Management District, Chauncey Goss.
Thanks very much, Governor, and good afternoon. Thank you and the Secretary and Dr. Brooks for being here today. Our district runs all the way from Orlando down to the Keys, and we have 16 counties, 9 million people. I happen to be a resident of Lee County, so I'm particularly happy to say welcome to Lee County, sir. I'm glad you're here, and thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for coming back, because when I think all the times you've been here, I think of the first time I saw you as governor, and that was, I think, on your second day of office. And that was when you passed an executive order 19-12, and it was about Florida's environment, your second day in office. And the foundation of that was coastal resiliency. And that was one of the very first things you said you were going to do was make sure we had a coastal resiliency officer and then follow through with that. And that's something you've done. You've absolutely put your money where your mouth is. Not that any of us doubted it, but thank you very much for that. I'd like to say that our executive director, Drew Bartlett, who's standing beside me, absolutely followed your lead, as did the governing board, and we've hired a resiliency officer at the Water Management District, Dr. Carolina Moran, and she does a great job of working with our municipalities, of working with our counties, of working with the state DEP, the governor's office, and our legislature to make sure that we are doing the best we can for resiliency. Remember, our foundation as a water management district is in flood control. Now, we had some bad floods back in the 40s, so we built the CNSF system after that, and that system is now, half a century old. So we need to deal with the changes we've seen in Florida, the changes we've seen in the landscape. We need to see the changes in population, where we have more people living in vulnerable areas along the coast, and we have a rising sea level and a constantly changing climate. So we've been able to do that, and thanks to you and these resiliency grants, we're going to be able to continue to do that. The other thing that executive order said was pay attention to the comprehensive Everglades restoration plan, because you cannot do resiliency if you mess up the Everglades, or if you don't get the Everglades right. If we don't have the water right for South Florida, there is no coastal resilience. So that's something we're working very closely on. And under your leadership, sir, we have 44 milestone projects that we're really proud of. I'm not going to go through all of them because it's hot, but I will tell you a couple of them that are, and you're familiar with them, our storage projects, the C-44 reservoir in the Port St. Lucie area, or in Port on St. Lucie River. The Caloosahatchee River, the C-43, that's going to be done in about 2 years. We've got some ASR wells north of the lake that we're going to use for storage, and then south of the lake, you know about the EAA reservoir, which is an incredibly important project to us. And I understand the Corps is getting ready to let another contract on that. And we're working on the stormwater treatment area for that, and we're ahead of schedule. So I'm really excited about that. This is all about protection. It's all about protecting Floridians, and that's what we're doing. We're protecting them from harmful algal blooms. We're protecting them from flooding. We're protecting them from sea level rise. So thanks very much for being here today, Governor.
Okay. Okay, Byron.
You guys all thought I was going to trip over that branch, didn't you? Real quick, first of all, Governor, I want to thank you so much for your leadership. Since you've been the governor of this state, you've been a man of your word. You've been committed to our waterways, not just in Southwest Florida, but all of Florida. And so what you're announcing here today is critical, not only just to protect our shorelines, to protect our waterways, but it's a portion of all the work you've also done that Chauncey just mentioned with the Everglades system itself. I hear from so many constituents throughout Southwest Florida, and one of the big questions they have once you get past D.C. issues is, what are we doing about our water? And I'm here to tell you that announcements like this today with Governor DeSantis and with the work of my colleagues and counterparts in the state legislature who are standing behind me, we are showing once again the legislature and the governor's commitment to waterways in our great state. But the way you do that is with planning. And that is where, your vision, Governor, has been essential, because you have to plan if you're going to succeed. And what I've seen from the legislature and from the governor's office these last few years has been a commitment to the planning and a commitment to the projects to preserve the beauty of Southwest Florida. So, Governor, thank you so much for your leadership. My friends in the legislature, thank you for your continued hard work.
All right. Good deal. So we're excited about this